Laura McGill's earliest memories were of the late-night hours, sitting quietly at the kitchen table, watching her mother, Gloria, juggle 2 part-time jobs. Gloria had been the epitome of resilience, having been left to raise Laura on her own after her father abandoned them when Laura was just a child. Gloria's sacrifices were endless, her hands often swollen from long hours as a nurse, but her eyes always sparkled with encouragement whenever Laura brought home schoolwork. "You're going to make something of yourself, Laura. Promise me you'll never let anything hold you back," Gloria would say, her voice weary but hopeful. Fueled by her mother's dreams, Laura became a star student, determined not to end up trapped in the same cycle of struggle. Her hard work paid off when she was awarded a scholarship that allowed her to attend a prestigious business school. The halls of the university were nothing like her childhood home, rich mahogany floors and marble staircases, walls adorned with paintings of benefactors who looked like they'd never known a day of worry. It was intimidating, but Laura was determined to prove herself. After graduation, she moved to the city and landed a job at a major corporation, starting at the bottom rung, as a junior associate. Those early years were filled with long nights of ramen dinners and endless paperwork, but her drive, combined with a sharp intellect, quickly caught the attention of her superiors. Promotions followed rapidly. By her 30th birthday, Laura had clawed her way up to become the head of a major department, managing dozens of employees and commanding respect in a world still dominated by men twice her age. Work was her life now, and her department was her domain. She led with a simple but powerful principle: treat people with respect, and they will respect you. Her employees admired her for it, and Laura, though not naturally the warmest of people, had grown into a firm but fair leader. This was the life she had dreamed of: professional success, a team that valued her, and a future that seemed full of possibilities. But life, as Laura would soon learn, had a way of surprising even the most prepared among us. It was at one of those after-work celebrations, where everyone's defenses dropped over a few glasses of cheap wine, that she met Mark Hargrove. He had that air of effortless confidence that came with privilege, tall, handsome, impeccably dressed. His deep-set green eyes seemed to appraise her in a way that made Laura feel both unnerved and intrigued. She'd been at the bar, celebrating her promotion, when he approached. "Congratulations on the promotion," he said, raising his glass. "I heard you're the new head of the department. Quite the accomplishment." Laura was momentarily thrown. She didn't recognize him, though clearly, he knew her. "I'm Mark Hargrove," he added, sensing her hesitation. "I work in finance. We have a few mutual clients." There was something disarming about his easy confidence. He seemed genuinely impressed with her work, and before the evening was over, he had managed to get her phone number. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of dates at expensive restaurants, rooftop drinks, and late-night conversations that left Laura both exhilarated and terrified. Mark was everything she hadn't realized she wanted: charming, ambitious, intelligent, and, above all, he seemed to truly see her. It wasn't long before they were inseparable. He invited her to his penthouse overlooking the city, a sleek and modern space that screamed wealth. Though Laura had built her career from the ground up, Mark's world of luxury was unlike anything she'd ever known. Still, when she was with him, it didn't feel like a divide. It felt like they were two people who had found each other at the right time. 6 months into their relationship, during one of their quiet nights together, Mark proposed. They had been sitting on his balcony, watching the city lights, when he turned to her, his expression unusually serious. "Laura, these past months with you have been the best of my life. I've never been more sure of anything. Will you marry me?" His words took her breath away. It felt fast, but it also felt right. This was a man who seemed to respect her strength, admire her independence, and share her ambitions. And so, without hesitation, she said yes. It wasn't until Laura met Mark's parents that the first cracks in her fairy tale began to show. The Hargroves were old money, or so they claimed. Their estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of town, was the kind of place that could have been mistaken for a museum, with its marble columns, manicured gardens, and stately gargoyles that glared down from the eaves. Mark's parents, Charles and Eleanor, greeted her with cool politeness that never warmed beyond the surface. Charles had the air of a man who had never been questioned a day in his life, and Eleanor, draped in expensive pearls and tailored dresses, sized Laura up like she was an item to be appraised. The house, with its imposing chandeliers and portraits of long-dead ancestors, only heightened Laura's sense of unease. At dinner, she fumbled with the silverware, painfully aware of Eleanor's judgmental gaze. When she reached for the wrong fork, Eleanor's soft, cutting voice filled the silence. "Perhaps things are done differently where you come from," she remarked, her tone laced with disdain. Laura felt the blood rush to her cheeks. Mark, seated beside her, gave a weak smile but said nothing to defend her. The evening was a lesson in discomfort, subtle barbs from Eleanor, Charles's disinterested aloofness, and Mark's uneasy silence. It wasn't long before Eleanor made it clear that she expected Laura to learn how to fit into the Hargrove family. She would have to attend etiquette lessons, be trained in the proper way to hold herself, speak, and behave. The Hargrove name demanded nothing less. Mark assured her it was only temporary, a formality, really. "Once they get to know you, they'll come around," he promised. "Just play along for a while. It's worth it, trust me." Laura wasn't so sure, but she loved Mark. And so, reluctantly, she agreed to play the role of the dutiful fiancé. Weeks turned into months, and Laura found herself more and more entrenched in the Hargroves' world. She was expected to know the family's long lineage, recite names and dates, and maintain an air of quiet elegance, all while balancing her demanding career. Her days were an exhausting blur of work meetings, wedding planning, and etiquette lessons where her every movement was scrutinized. One night, after an especially grueling etiquette class, Laura received a call from her mother. "How are the wedding preparations, honey?" Gloria asked, her voice filled with the warmth and concern that Laura had been missing. Laura hesitated. She hadn't told her mother the full extent of her struggles with Mark's family. "It's a lot," she admitted. "But I'm managing." Her mother's voice softened. "Remember, Laura, the wedding is about you and Mark. It's not about pleasing anyone else. Don't let them change who you are." Her mother's words lingered long after they hung up, but it wasn't until her wedding day that they truly took root. The morning of the wedding was a blur of silk and flowers, of whispered conversations between vendors and guests milling about. But beneath the surface, tension crackled. Laura could feel the weight of Eleanor's expectations in every detail, every glance. The ceremony itself went by in a haze, but the moment the reception began, the mask Eleanor had worn for months slipped. As the guests sipped champagne and mingled, Eleanor approached Laura with an icy smile. "Make sure our friends are well taken care of, won't you? You're practically family now, dear. Show some initiative." The words hit Laura like a slap. Before she could respond, Eleanor was already waving her towards a group of distinguished-looking guests. Laura stood there, her hands trembling as she clutched her bouquet. This was supposed to be her wedding day, a celebration of love and partnership. Yet here she was, being treated like an outsider, a servant in her own life. Summoning her courage, she confronted Mark. "Your mother is treating me like the help. This isn't what I signed up for." Mark, already half drunk from celebrating, shrugged. "Just do what she asks, Laura. It's not a big deal." Laura stared at him, the man she had thought she knew, the man she had believed loved her for who she was. "Not a big deal?" she repeated, her voice rising. "This is our wedding, Mark. And your mother is humiliating me in front of everyone." He sighed, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Look, Laura, you should be grateful I chose you. There were plenty of women better suited for this life. You're the one making a fuss over nothing." It was as if the ground beneath Laura's feet had crumbled. She felt the weight of his words crush her. The man she loved, the man she had been ready to marry, didn't see her as an equal, he saw her as something to be shaped, molded, controlled. Just as Laura felt herself spiraling into a decision she couldn't take back, a voice cut through the noise. It was her mother, Gloria, standing tall despite her petite frame. She had arrived late to the reception, unnoticed by most, but now all eyes were on her. "Mark," Gloria said, her voice calm but laced with steel, "there's something you need to understand about my daughter, and perhaps about your family, too." Laura's heart raced. She hadn't told her mother everything about the struggles with the Hargroves, but somehow Gloria knew. She always knew. Gloria turned to face the room, her gaze sweeping over the assembled guests, many of whom were already whispering amongst themselves. Then, looking directly at Eleanor, she added, "Your family has quite the reputation, doesn't it? Old money, aristocratic ties, generations of privilege. But it's funny, isn't it, how stories can be rewritten, how truths can be buried. The room fell deathly silent. Eleanor's face paled, her icy composure cracking. "What are you talking about?" she asked, though there was a tremor in her voice now. Gloria smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile, it was the smile of someone who knew she held the winning hand. "I did some research of my own after you started pressuring my daughter to fit into your mold. It turns out your family's wealth isn't as old as you claim. In fact, the Hargroves aren't even real Hargroves. Your great-grandfather changed his name when he came to this country after being involved in a fraud scandal back in England. He wasn't a lord, he was a swindler. A common criminal. And your so-called aristocratic background? It's built on a lie." The crowd collectively gasped, whispers turning to full-blown conversations as Eleanor staggered backward, eyes wide with shock. Mark, still standing next to Laura, looked between his mother and Gloria in disbelief. "Is this true?" he demanded. Eleanor's face twisted in fury and humiliation. "How dare you?" she hissed at Gloria, but it was too late. The damage was done. Laura stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. She had no idea her mother had uncovered such a secret, but in that moment, she felt a swell of pride. Gloria had come to defend her, truly defend her, in a way that no one else ever had. Mark, now desperate to salvage what was left of the day, turned back to Laura. "This doesn't change anything. We can still get married. None of this matters." His voice was strained, panicked. But for Laura, everything had changed. She saw Mark for what he truly was, a man who had never respected her, a man who, like his parents, believed he was entitled to control her life. She had worked too hard, fought too many battles, to sacrifice her dignity for a life that was a lie. Taking a deep breath, Laura stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "I'm calling off the wedding." The room erupted into chaos, with guests murmuring in disbelief and the sound of chairs scraping against the floor as people rose to leave. Eleanor let out a strangled gasp, but Laura didn't wait for her response. She turned on her heel and walked toward the exit, her mother close behind her. Mark grabbed her arm, desperation flashing in his eyes. "Laura, please. Don't do this. We can fix it." She met his gaze, and for the first time, she saw him as he truly was, small, fragile, and afraid. "No, Mark," she said softly. "You don't get to fix me. I deserve better." And with that, she walked away. The days that followed the cancelled wedding were a whirlwind of emotions. Laura returned to her apartment, the place that had once felt like a sanctuary but now seemed strangely unfamiliar. She was flooded with relief, but there was also a profound sense of loss of the future she had envisioned with Mark, loss of the life she had thought she wanted. For so long, she had been focused on the climb, first her career, then her relationship, and now she stood at the top of a mountain she no longer wanted to be on. But, as always, work proved to be her refuge. The Monday after the wedding, Laura returned to the office. Her colleagues had heard about the debacle, there were murmurs and sidelong glances, but no one said anything directly to her. Still, the atmosphere in the office felt different. Instead of judgment, there was a kind of solidarity. Her assistant, Karen, who had been with her for years, greeted her with a smile. "You did the right thing, Laura," Karen said, handing her the morning's agenda. "We all know it." Laura blinked in surprise. "You do?" Karen nodded. "Everyone's talking about it. But not in a bad way. You showed strength. We're all proud of you." For the first time in weeks, Laura felt the weight lift slightly from her shoulders. The idea that she had disappointed others had gnawed at her since the wedding, but hearing Karen's words gave her a sense of validation she hadn't realized she needed. As the days passed, Laura threw herself into work, leaning on the people who had always been there, her team. She organized department meetings, oversaw new projects, and made sure her focus stayed on the future. Her colleagues rallied around her, reminding her that the success she had built was hers alone. She had earned it. It was during one of these long days at work that Ronald entered her life. Ronald Marks was a colleague from another department, tall, with an easy smile and the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. He had always been on the periphery of Laura's world, a friendly face in meetings or at office gatherings, but they had never spent much time together. One afternoon, Ronald knocked on her office door. "Mind if I join you for lunch?" Laura looked up, surprised. "Sure," she said, smiling. "I could use a break." As they sat down in the office cafeteria, their conversation started out casual: work, mutual projects, a few light jokes. But gradually, it deepened. Ronald, it turned out, had gone through his own difficult breakup a few years ago. He understood what it meant to have the rug pulled out from under you, to realize that the future you had planned was no longer possible. "It gets better," he said, looking at her with sincerity. "It's hard now, but you'll find yourself again. You already are." His words struck a chord with her. In the weeks since the wedding, she had been so focused on moving forward that she hadn't allowed herself to process what she had been through. But here, with Ronald, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: an ease, a sense of being seen for who she truly was, without judgment. Their lunches became a regular thing, and soon, Laura found herself looking forward to them more than she wanted to admit. There was a warmth to Ronald that was different from what she had experienced with Mark. He didn't try to impress her, didn't push her to change or conform. He was simply there, steady, reliable, and kind. As the months passed, their friendship deepened into something more. And this time, Laura didn't rush. She allowed herself to take things slowly, to enjoy the quiet moments without feeling the pressure to meet anyone's expectations but her own. A year after the cancelled wedding, Laura found herself standing on the balcony of her own apartment, looking out at the city skyline. The evening air was crisp, and she felt a deep sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. Her journey had been painful, filled with heartbreak and betrayal, but it had also been one of self-discovery. She had learned to trust her instincts, to value her own worth, and to let go of the need to please others at the expense of herself. Beside her, Ronald stood, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. They hadn't moved in together yet, they were taking things one step at a time, but their relationship was solid, built on trust and mutual respect. It was a partnership in the truest sense of the word. "I never thanked you," Laura said quietly, turning to face him. "For helping me find myself again." Ronald smiled, his eyes soft with understanding. "You didn't need my help, Laura. You found yourself all on your own." And in that moment, Laura knew it was true. Beneath the surface of her old life, beneath the expectations and the disappointments, she had always been there, strong, capable, and worthy of love, both from others and from herself. As she leaned into Ronald's embrace, Laura realized that her story wasn't one of failure, but of transformation. She had reclaimed her life, her future, and her happiness. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly free. If you liked this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.